And a reading from Acts chapter 8. Then an angel of the Lord said to Philip, "Get up and go toward the south to the road that goes down from Jerusalem to Gaza. This is a wilderness road." So he got up and went. Now, there was an Ethiopian eunuch, a court official of the Candace, queen of the Ethiopians, in charge of her entire treasury. He had come to Jerusalem to worship and was returning home, seated in his chariot. He was reading the prophet Isaiah. Then the Spirit said to Philip, "Go over to this chariot and join it." So Philip ran up to it and heard him reading the prophet Isaiah. He asked, "Do you understand what you're reading?" The eunuch replied, "How can I unless someone guides me?" And he invited Philip to get in and sit beside him. Now the passage of scripture that he was reading was this: "Like a sheep he was led to the slaughter, and like a lamb silent before its shearer, so he does not open his mouth. In his humiliation justice was denied him. Who can describe his generation? For his life is taken away from the earth." The eunuch asked Philip, "About whom, may I ask you, does the prophet say this? About himself or about someone else?" Then Philip began to speak, and starting with this scripture, he proclaimed to him the good news about Jesus. As they were going along the road, they came to some water, and the eunuch said, "Look, here is water. What is to prevent me from being baptized?" He commanded the chariot to stop, and both of them, Philip and the eunuch, went down into the water, and Philip baptized him. When they came up out of the water, the Spirit of the Lord snatched Philip away. The eunuch saw him no more and went on his way rejoicing. This is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. Well, Philip had a thriving urban ministry in Samaria with throngs of people gathering to worship. There was excitement and energy. Friends were telling their friends about it, and lives were being radically changed by the love and grace of Jesus Christ. Yet our text today begins with the words, "Then an angel of the Lord said to Philip, 'Get up and go toward the south to the road that goes down from Jerusalem to Gaza.'" The gospel writer Luke, who also wrote the book of Acts, parenthetically adds, "This is a wilderness road." It's not just a detail about a rural road. It's a callback to the Exodus and the wilderness wanderings where God was present and protecting the people of God. It's kind of like Luke is saying, hey, pay attention. Just watch what God is up to in the wilderness again. So Philip leaves his urban mission for a rural journey where he has no idea just what's going to happen. The angel says, "Go," and Philip goes. And it turns out that Bible study, baptism, and barrier breaking were the order of the day, since the Spirit leads Philip to a wayside rest where he finds an Ethiopian eunuch. Now, I'm not a betting person. But if I were, I would definitely put money down on no one here thinking about eunuchs in an average day. I checked. Both my Twitter feed and Facebook page are bereft of mentions of eunuchs. Now, I haven't checked, but I doubt that there's a Pinterest eunuch page. You see, eunuchs just aren't something that take up a whole lot of mind space for us today. In Philip's day, however, officials who served in royal courts, members of the cabinet, as it were, well, they were required to be, how to put it delicately, surgically altered in order to be fully devoted to their work. So, Philip finds this eunuch pulled over on the side of the road, chilling in his chariot, reading from the prophet Isaiah. You know, kind of like we're all prone to do. And then we are privy to this remarkable encounter between Philip and the eunuch. First, there's a small group Bible study centered on verses from Isaiah chapter 53. Then there's Philip sharing the good news of Jesus Christ by engaging in conversation with the eunuch and unpacking how those verses from Isaiah can be seen as pointing to the depth and to the breadth of God's love for humanity and of God's love for the eunuch himself. And then there's the eunuch's impromptu baptism. By the end of this encounter, both Philip and the eunuch go their separate ways, and we might be tempted to think that the point is go and be like Philip. Now, maybe on your drive home today, you'll find a car pulled over on the side of the road where the driver's going to want to study the book of Isaiah with you. It could happen. It might not. But I think if we try to reduce this encounter to go and be like Philip, we miss the heart of God's promise to us. Now, to be clear, Philip is great. Being like him is wonderful. The world could use more Philips. But what I want to offer today is this. Instead of seeing ourselves as Philip, we can see ourselves as the eunuch. You and I, we are eunuchs. Likely not literally, of course. But there is some barrier in your life and in mine that stands in between us and a full encounter with Jesus Christ. Here's what I mean. In verse 36 of today's reading, the eunuch says, "Look, here's water. What is to prevent me from being baptized?" And on the surface, this may seem to be a rhetorical question like, hey, there's water here, so let's go ahead and do this thing. But it's actually a real question. And the real answer to the question, what is to prevent me from being baptized, is, well, there's nearly everything to prevent you from being baptized. You see, as a eunuch in the queen's court, he certainly had material wealth, but there were issues of race and national identity and religion getting in the way. You see, at best, the relationship of eunuchs with the people of God was complicated. You can look up Deuteronomy chapter 23, verse 1 to see why. And in fact, grab one of those pew Bibles and do that now. I encourage you to do that. It's on page 177, Deuteronomy 23, verse 1. Page 177, Deuteronomy 23, verse 1. Look it up and you can see why I'm hesitant to read it aloud. Why perhaps the Bible needs a sticker on it to warn us about its language. Did you get there? I'm not going to read it aloud. I'm going to be the guy who gets kicked out of church for reading it. But there it is. Eunuchs have a conflicted relationship with the people of God. Such graphic language, too. But anyway, there were all sorts of barriers. There were all sorts of barriers that were around the eunuch. There was, in fact, a lot to prevent him from being baptized. He was an outsider, and Philip could have pointed to Deuteronomy 23 as an excuse to pass this guy by. And when we're honest with ourselves, we can identify with the eunuch. There are times when we feel somehow incomplete, when we feel separate, when we feel broken. Now, some of those barriers are put up by others, and we've built some of those barriers ourselves. Maybe it's that you're dealing with illness or addiction. Maybe you've been told that you're too young or you're too old. Maybe you're so caught up in the rat race that you've lost sight of what's really important. Maybe you're greedy or envious. Maybe you've been unfaithful to your spouse or your partner. Maybe you've been told that, you don't look right, or you don't act right, or you just don't fit in. Whatever the case may be, I'm convinced that each one of us in some way can identify with the eunuch. And what's remarkable about this encounter between Philip and the eunuch is about what the good news of Jesus Christ does to those barriers that stand in between them. Those barriers all get broken down. Jesus comes to us in our eunuch-like state and seeks to heal us and bring us together in right relationship. Now, Jesus doesn't condone our greed or envy or infidelity, but Jesus seeks to change us and forgive us and transform us and renew us. Jesus doesn't let illness or addiction or cultural standards get the last word. Jesus embraces us, welcomes us, and saves us from whatever stands in between us and him. God sends Philip to meet up with the eunuch, to have Bible study, to share baptism, and to break barriers. And yes, God may be calling you to be Philip to someone. And most certainly, God is sending a Philip to you on the wilderness roads of your life. Because in the end, what matters most is not the barriers between us, be they race or national identity or even religion. What matters most is the love of God made known in Jesus Christ, this barrier-breaking, all-out search and rescue mission for all of humanity, even for the eunuchs, even for you and me. Amen.